Damian Wolf was the kind of man people whispered about when he walked into a room. Cold, calculated, ruthless in business and impossible to impress. He built Wolf Industries from the ground up after losing his parents young, and now, at 34, he had everything a man could want: fortune, reputation, and control. Everything except warmth. Love, to him, was a distraction, a liability, and blind dates, a complete waste of time. So when his best friend and assistant, Marcus, walked into his office one Friday morning with that mischievous grin and said, "I signed you up for one last blind date," Damian's glare could have frozen lava. "Cancel it," he said flatly, not looking up from his laptop. Marcus sighed. "You've said no to the last 6. Just this once, man. She's not like the others." "They're never like the others," Damian muttered, shutting the laptop with a click. Marcus hesitated, then smiled slyly. "She doesn't know who you are." That made Damian look up. "Excuse me, I told her your name is Damian Cole. You're an architect. No CEO stuff, no headlines, no fortune. Just a guy." Damian narrowed his eyes, torn between irritation and curiosity. Maybe, just maybe, pretending not to be himself for one night didn't sound so bad. That evening, the restaurant was glowing with soft jazz and golden light. Crystal chandeliers hung above, casting reflections across polished marble floors. Damian sat alone in his reserved booth, his posture perfect, his expression bored. 10 minutes passed, then 15, still no sign of her. He checked his watch for the 3rd time and sighed. Typical. Just as he was about to leave, a flustered voice called out from the entrance. "Wait. Please. I'm so sorry I'm late." Every head turned, and so did his. She was nothing like what he'd expected. Her hair was tied in a loose bun, strands falling messily around her face. She wore a pale blue dress that looked modest but fit her perfectly. Her shoes weren't designer, he could tell from one glance, but she walked with confidence anyway. When she reached the table, she smiled apologetically. "Are you Damian Cole?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "That's me. I'm Lila Evans." She sat down, slightly out of breath. "I'm really sorry. The bus broke down halfway here, and then the taxi app kept crashing." "Bus," Damian repeated, arching a brow. She blinked. "Yes, bus. The yellow thing with wheels. Usually full of people and no air conditioning." The hint of sarcasm in her voice caught him off guard, and before he could stop himself, he actually smiled. "You're not what I expected," he said. "Good," she replied, picking up the menu. "I hate being predictable." As the evening went on, the strangest thing happened. Damian, who usually hated small talk, found himself leaning forward, listening. Lila was a schoolteacher, barely scraping by on her modest salary. She taught 3rd graders and loved every chaotic second of it. She talked about her students with such warmth, such passion, that even Damian, who thought children were tiny agents of chaos, found himself smiling. When he asked what she did for fun, she said, "I paint sometimes. Not good enough to sell, but enough to forget the world for a while." When he asked about her dreams, she said, "To open an art club for kids who can't afford lessons." He looked at her differently after that. No one had ever spoken to him like that before, without trying to impress him, without knowing what he was worth. And when the waiter brought the bill, she reached for it. "Don't bother," he said instinctively. She shook her head. "No, it's okay. I can pay my half." He stared at her, speechless for the first time in years. After some playful arguing, she relented, but not before teasing him. "You architects must make pretty good money, huh?" He smirked. "You could say that." Outside, the night air was crisp. She thanked him for dinner and walked toward the bus stop at the corner. Damian followed a few steps behind, uncertain why he didn't just call his car. "Let me drive you home," he offered. "It's late." She turned to him, that same soft smile lighting up her face. "That's sweet, but it's okay. I'm used to late buses. You trust strangers that easily." "I don't," she said. "But you don't seem like a bad guy, Damian Cole." The bus pulled up, and before boarding, she looked at him one last time. "Thank you for tonight." It was unexpectedly nice. He didn't know what to say. He just nodded, and as the bus drove away, he stood there, watching her silhouette disappear behind the glass. For a man who prided himself on control, Damien felt something unfamiliar twist inside him: curiosity, warmth, and a strange sense of loss. The following morning, Damien sat in his glass-walled office on the 47th floor, but for once, the skyline didn't impress him. The contracts on his desk blurred before his eyes, the numbers meant nothing. All he could see was her. Lila Evans, the girl who'd smiled like she wasn't trying to impress him, the girl who didn't know his name was plastered across every financial magazine in the country. Her laugh had followed him into his dreams. Her honesty had burned a hole through the armor he'd worn for years. He told himself it was curiosity, that he just wanted to understand her. But deep down, Damien knew he was already caught. 2 days later, he did something completely out of character. He left work early. Marcus nearly dropped his tablet when Damien said, "Cancel my afternoon meetings." "Are you sick?" Marcus asked. "Do I need to call a doctor?" "No," Damien said, straightening his tie. "I'm visiting a school." Marcus blinked. "A what?" The school was nothing like the marble halls Damien was used to. The walls were covered with colorful paper cutouts, handprints, and crooked paintings. The floor tiles squeaked. The air smelled faintly of crayons and laughter. Through the window of a classroom, he saw her. Lila stood surrounded by a dozen energetic kids, her hair tied back, her face glowing as she leaned over a table, showing a little girl how to mix blue and yellow paint to make green. Her smile was radiant, real. Something inside Damien softened, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a CEO at all. When the bell rang, she stepped outside, wiping her hands on a paint-stained apron. Her eyes widened when she saw him waiting by the gate. "Damien," she said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I realized," he said with a half-smile, "I never asked for a second date." She laughed softly. "You came all the way here just to ask me that?" "Yes." He paused, lowering his voice. "And maybe because I missed you." Her smile faltered slightly, as if unsure whether to believe him. "You barely know me. That's what second dates are for," he replied. They went for coffee that afternoon, at a small cafe she loved, where the tables were chipped and the barista knew her by name. He listened as she talked about her brother, who was still in college, and how she worked double shifts to help with his tuition. She never complained, just smiled, saying it was worth it. "Why do you do it?" he asked quietly. "Because when you love someone," she said simply, "you show up for them." Those words stayed with him long after she left. Weeks passed. One date turned into 3, then 5. They went for late-night walks, shared takeout dinners, and spent hours talking about everything and nothing. Damien stopped checking his emails after 10 p.m. He started sketching again, something he hadn't done since college. He laughed, really laughed. He was no longer the man people feared. He was a man rediscovering life, one smile at a time. But the secret still hung between them like a shadow. Lila still thought he was Damien Cole, architect. And he knew the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. It came out one evening, at a charity event she'd volunteered for. She was helping kids display their art projects when a journalist approached Damien for an interview. Cameras flashed, and before he could stop it, "Mr. Wolf, over here." A few words about Wolf Industries' new tech grant. Lila froze. Her brush slipped from her hand. Her eyes darted to his face. "Wolf," she whispered. "As in, the billionaire." The air between them thickened. He took a step toward her, guilt washing over him. "Lila, I can explain. So everything you told me was a lie," she said softly, her voice breaking. "You let me think you were someone else." "Why?" "Because I wanted you to see me," he said, his tone desperate. "Not my money, not my company, me." She blinked back tears, shaking her head. "You didn't need to lie for that, Damien. I already saw you." And just like that, she turned and walked away. Days became weeks. The penthouse felt emptier than ever. Damien tried calling, texting, nothing. He even showed up at the school once, but she avoided him. He'd lost her, until one rainy evening, he found a small envelope on his doorstep. Inside was a note written in her delicate handwriting. Greater than, you once said you wanted to see the world through my eyes. Tomorrow, come to the school, after hours. He went, heart pounding. When he entered the art room, he found the lights dimmed and the walls covered in paintings, vibrant, messy, full of life. Each one painted by her students. And in the center of the room stood Lila, holding a small canvas. She handed it to him. It was a painting of a man in a black suit standing in the rain, surrounded by color, kids' laughter and bright skies all around him. I was angry, she said quietly. But then I realized, maybe you were just scared. Like I was. We both hide in our own ways. He swallowed hard. Lila, she stepped closer. You changed my life, Damien. Not because you're rich, but because you cared. The kids adore you. She took a breath. I adore you. Rain tapped softly against the window as he pulled her into his arms. He whispered against her hair, you were supposed to be my last blind date. But you turned out to be my first real love. She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. Then maybe it's time to stop calling it blind. And in that small, paint-splattered classroom, surrounded by colors and laughter, the cold millionaire finally found his heart again. That night, he couldn't sleep. Not because of the deals waiting for him the next morning, but because a woman with paint-stained hands and honest eyes had smiled at him like he was human again.